I didn't want to be a professional writer, but I always wrote. I found a handwritten story in my grandfather's diary when I was 6, and it was my first story apparently, and it said, "Story is God, God is story." But yeah, I've been writing for a long time, and then I wrote in school, I wrote in university, and only started writing professionally about 15 years ago. Ideas are pretty much everywhere. The problem is, how do you then take them, mix and match them, and make them up into a story? Normally for me it comes from Indian epics, the magic and the mythology. It has fed a lot into it. Folklore, my grandma used to tell me loads of stories. But I also go to museums, reading other books, lots of different things like that. But I also listen to people on the trains. When I go into school, I steal a name or an incident or something like that. So if you're around me, watch out, I might be stealing from you. I can write anywhere. So if you put me in a coffee shop and say you have to write for the next 1 hour, I will write. But I prefer writing at home more because I get up at 4 in the morning to write. So there's no coffee shop open at that time. So I normally write at home. My first drafts of picture books are always on paper in notebooks. I buy colorful notebooks. That's my excuse for buying stationery. And then I will then transcribe it into a laptop. Or if I'm writing a longer piece, then I would write the first few chapters on paper. And then once I know I like what I'm writing, then I'll transfer that into the computer and then start again. We don't get that much of a choice. I think it's better not to interfere. What you don't want is what's in your head to go to the illustrator. So normally, illustrators are not put in touch with you until most of the illustrations are done. For these books, I saw the first few pages, and then we saw the rest of it towards the end. For Parton's Pumpkin, I saw the roughs as well, because we wanted to be correct in terms of the geography and the social aspects of the story, because it's a story about a particular set of people in India. So the illustrator did her own research, but we wanted to make sure we were all on the same page in terms of how it was portrayed. So I think usually you don't get to see the illustrations until they're almost done. I think one would be the way I speak, and my pronunciation and the words I use will come from a lot from how I read stories and I listened to stories. But a lot of the rhythm comes from my storytelling experience. So I know when I'm going to tell this story, where I want to pause, where I want the beats to go. So I read my picture books aloud probably every time I write it, then I'll read it. So which means it would have been read aloud for like 40-50 times before the words get finalized. So the influence for most of the text in terms of choosing the words, getting the repetitive lines in, all of those things comes from, I think, my training as a storyteller. There were always books around the house, but not in the same way in a British home, because so I learned 3 languages by the time I was 7. So we read English in school, and I brought back books from school. Then we read everything Tamil at home because my mom reads a lot. So I used to read everything my mom read. And as long as it didn't have things that not age appropriate, they just let me read everything. And then I learned Hindi as well, and therefore I brought books home. But we weren't read to, because that's not something Indians do. Now probably a lot of people have started doing, but we were told to. So my grandmother will tell me stories, her sister will tell me stories. Those stories will be more from the epics or the mythology or folk tales. And then my mother will tell me stories, but those are made up ones because she wasn't told stories when she grew up, so she doesn't know a lot of the folk tale. So for those, she'll just make up as she went along. And then the other interest comes from she writing plays. So she used to write plays and we used to go on stage to act them out. And that kind of gave me a thing that, oh, I want to be able to write the play that my mother wrote as well. And that's kind of how I grew up with stories around me. Giraffe. Coffee. City. Oh, it's an Indian dish. It's called idli. It's steamed rice cakes, and I will eat it for any meal, any number of times, continuously for months and months. Oh, a poet and an artist. A notebook and a pen. That counts as one. A book. Preferably, probably in that case, I will choose an electronic thing like a Kindle so I can carry 200 books in one go. And the third one would be probably something comfortable to sleep in. So like a warm, comfy sleeping bag.